The monitor says Walter Greer is standing at the window. I am 7 feet from his bed, and he has not opened his eyes in 9 days. By morning I will understand why this agency pays double for this address, and why the contract I signed has one line in it that isn't about medicine at all. There's a sentence in his daughter's instructions I didn't understand on my first night. I understand it now, and I need you to hear it before I tell you anything else. I've been sitting with dying men for 6 years, and on paper Walter Greer was the easiest job I'd had all year. The agency calls it overnight comfort care, which is a soft way of saying you sit in a dark farmhouse and keep a man company while his body finishes what it's doing. You change out the oxygen tubing. You turn him every few hours so he doesn't get sores. You write down the numbers, pulse, oxygen saturation, respirations. On a clipboard the hospice nurse checks every other day. Mostly you sit in a recliner in the corner and you wait, because that is the whole job, and there is no dignified way to make it sound more exciting than that. Walter was 81. Lung disease, then his heart, then everything at once, the way it goes. His daughter Renee paid cash, which the agency liked, and paid more than the going rate, which I liked, and drove the 90 minutes out from the city every third day to sit with him for an hour before driving back. She was polite to me in the particular careful way people are polite to someone they've hired to watch their father die. She showed me where the extra blankets were. She showed me the baby monitor. The farmhouse itself was the kind of place that's been in the family so long nobody remembers redecorating it. A wood stove nobody used anymore. A shelf of hunting trophies gone dusty. A recliner in the corner of Walter's room worn into the shape of whoever sat in it longest. I settled into a routine fast, because caregiving work is mostly routine. Turn him at midnight and 4, check his oxygen line, sip coffee in the dark and listen to the house tick and settle around me. I've done this in a dozen houses. Farmhouses always settle the loudest. It was a cheap one, the kind new parents use. A little camera clipped above the headboard, feeding a picture to an app on my phone, so I could step downstairs for coffee, without leaving him unwatched on paper. For my peace of mind, Renee said, and I didn't think anything of it. Half my clients have one. Families like being able to check in from wherever they are. The first night, nothing. The second night, nothing. I want to be honest about how boring this job usually is, because what happened after isn't scarier for being sudden. It's scarier for how slowly it let me get comfortable first. On my third night I started recording audio on my phone, propped against the humidifier on the dresser. Not because anything had happened yet. I do it with every client. If a family ever accuses a caregiver of something in that room, you want your own record. I want to be clear that I started this recording for boring, practical reasons, and I am glad, now, that I did. There was one line in the contract Renee had me sign that I remember reading twice, because it read less like an instruction and more like a rule from somewhere else. Under no circumstance is Mr. Greer to be left alone in the room at the moment of passing. Not for a phone call, not for the bathroom, not for anything. I'd worked 11 of these contracts before this one, and none of them had a line like that, worded like that, in bold. I asked the hospice nurse about it. She said families get particular near the end, and left it there. I believed her, because I wanted to. On the 5th night, I stepped out to the kitchen for 4 minutes to reheat coffee, and when I checked the monitor from downstairs, the bed was empty. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I remember being in the doorway, and Walter was exactly where I'd left him. Eyes closed, chest rising in that shallow, mechanical way, tube still taped under his nose. A man that far gone does not sit up, does not walk to a window, and does not lie back down and arrange his own blanket before I get upstairs. I checked the blanket. It was tucked the way I tucked it 2 hours earlier, except one corner had come loose and been refolded. A small fussy correction I would never have made myself. I told myself the feed had lagged. Cheap cameras do that. I wrote it in my notes as a camera glitch, and I went back downstairs and I did not touch my coffee again that night. I want you to hold on to that detail. The lag, the delay, the half second the picture in the room don't agree, because it matters later, and I promise you I will come back to it. On the 7th night I called Renee, because I am not a man who scares easily, and I was, by then, scared. I told her about the empty bed on the screen. There was a silence on the line long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Just don't leave the room," she said, finally. "Please, not even for a second. Not this time. Not this time." I asked what she meant by that, and she said her grandfather had died in that same bedroom in 1994, and the caregiver that week had stepped out for maybe a minute, and something about how he came home afterward had never been right with her family since. I asked her what not right meant, exactly. Whether he'd been hurt, whether he'd said something, whether he'd quit. She was quiet long enough that I thought the line had dropped again. Then she said, very evenly, that he hadn't quit, that he'd finished out the week fine, and that the only thing anyone in her family could ever point to was that he stopped answering to his own name by the second week, and answered instead, without fail, every single time to her grandfather's. She would rather not say more than that over the phone. Then she apologized and hung up before I could ask the only question I actually wanted answered. That's the open loop I need you carrying for the next few minutes. Something happened to the man who watched over her grandfather. Nobody in that family has ever finished a sentence about what. I found the photograph 2 nights later, going through a hallway closet for a spare blanket. Renee's grandfather, younger than I'd ever pictured him, sitting up in that same bed by that same window, decades before Walter's turn in it. And in the corner of the frame, blurred the way old film blurs anything that moves during a long exposure, there is a second shape standing at the glass. Nobody in the photo is looking at it. Nobody in the photo seems to know it's there. On the 11th night, the sharpest thing happened, and I need to tell it exactly the way it happened, because I've gone over it 100 times since, and I still can't make it smaller than it was. I stepped into the hallway to answer the hospice nurse's evening call. Phone screen open to the monitor feed the whole time, the way I always did now. I was 30 seconds into that call when Walter walked into frame and stood at the window. I hung up mid-sentence and I was through that door in under 3 seconds, and Walter was in the bed, eyes closed, chest rising in that same shallow rhythm it always had. Nothing about him had moved, and I know that because I was standing over him counting his breaths with my own hand on his wrist to prove it to myself. I looked back at the monitor still open in my hand. On the screen, delayed by some fraction of a second I could never explain to anyone who asked, Walter was still standing at the window. Both pictures were true at once, on the same device, a full breath apart. I was looking at the room, and I was looking at the room, and they did not agree with each other. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, phone in one hand, Walter's wrist in the other, watching the little screen finally catch up to the bed I was already standing beside. The figure at the window folding itself back into a sleeping old man 1 frame at a time, like film winding backward. If you've made it this far into the night with me, that's the moment I stopped telling myself it was a glitch. That's the moment I started sleeping in the recliner with the lamp on. And if any of this is getting under your skin the way it got under mine, there's a new one of these waiting for you every night, so stay close. I called Renee again the next morning. She didn't pick up. I called the agency instead and asked flatly whether any other caregiver had ever reported anything unusual at this address. The woman on the phone went quiet in the exact same way Renee had and told me, carefully, that this particular address had a note on file that only senior staff could see, and that the pay rate reflected that, and that she wasn't authorized to tell me anything more, and that if I wanted to end the placement early no one would think less of me for it. Någon alle vartaroam. Som de made to nom, I none of for it to the moan. I didn't end the placement, I want to be honest about why. Partly it was the money. Mostly, by then, I needed to know how the sentence about her grandfather's caregiver actually ended. The last night, Walter's number started dropping the way the hospice nurse had told me they eventually would. Oxygen down, pulse thin and uneven, the long slow unwinding that means hours, not days. I clipped the pulse oximeter to his finger the way I had every night, and I watched the little number on the reader climb and settle. And then, around 3 in the morning, the display started doing something I had never once seen it do in 6 years of this work. It started reading 2 heartbeats. Not an error message, not a flat line with noise on it. 2 distinct rhythms, overlapping, out of step with each other at first, and then, second by second, falling into the same time. There was 1 hand under that clip, there was 1 man in that bed. I checked his pulse myself, at his wrist, with my fingers. At the same moment the machine was reading 2, and I felt exactly 1, faint and slow, and exactly what a dying man's pulse should feel like. I don't think, anymore, that whatever this is has ever been waiting outside that window for a way in. I think it has been inside Walter for a long time. Longer than I've known him, maybe longer than Renee has been alive. Moving in the slow, patient way that takes years instead of minutes. Using the only door a body like his has left open. I think the moment a man like Walter finally lets go is not a death at all to whatever this is. I think it's a handoff. And I think the entire reason this job pays double, The entire reason for that one bolded line in the contract is that a handoff like that needs a witness in the room, awake, watching the whole way through, because interrupted, even for a phone call, even for the bathroom, it doesn't finish. That's what happened to Renee's grandfather's caregiver. I'm certain of it now, even though I still don't know how it ended for him, and some part of me is grateful I don't. I thought about leaving. I want you to know that I thought about it seriously, sometime around 3 in the morning, sitting in that recliner with the lamp on and my coat already half on my shoulders. What kept me in that chair wasn't the money anymore, and it wasn't professional pride either. It was the plain, stupid fact that Walter Greer had not asked for any of this, had not signed anything, had spent 81 years being an ordinary man who fixed tractors and paid his taxes, and somebody needed to at least be in the room with him for whatever this actually was. I have told myself that reason so many times since that night that I'm not sure anymore whether I believe it or whether I just need it to be true. His breathing stopped at 4:47 in the morning. I know because I was staring at the clock when it happened, and I know because the machine beside the bed made the flat, single tone that machine is built to make exactly once. And the second heartbeat on the oximeter did not stop. It got stronger. Walter's eyes opened for the first time in 9 days. They didn't move toward me. They moved, slowly and with intent, toward the little camera clipped above the headboard, and they held there the way you'd look at someone you were finally allowed to look at directly. I did not stay in that room to see what happened next, and I am not ashamed of that, whatever it says about me. I went downstairs to call for help, and that is where the recording keeps going, after I stopped being able to explain it kindly. The front door has a child-proof lock on it, the kind you twist at the top, installed years ago, back when Walter used to wander in his sleep at night. I heard it turn by itself from the hallway while I was still dialing. Then I heard something come down the stairs behind me. In Walter's slippers. At Walter's pace. Except each footstep landed a half beat behind the one before it, like two people learning, for the first time, how to walk as one, and not quite there yet. I did not turn around. The recording ends there. Battery dead, phone left running on the kitchen counter, found the next morning by whoever came looking for me. I never went back for my final paycheck. Renee sold the farmhouse 8 months later. As far as I know, it's a rental property now. Quiet, unremarkable, 4 stars online. But the agency I worked for still carries that address, flagged under senior staff only. Still pays double for an overnight there. And last month, for the first time since Walter, somebody accepted the placement. If this one's going to keep you up tonight, subscribe. I'm back here with another one tomorrow night, and I'd rather you not be alone in the dark when you press play. Niece.